Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan and today we'll be talking about the 10 mistakes that every player makes. It can be easy to blame your teammates in solo queue, and sometimes they are really just making the game more difficult than it needs to be. Maybe it's a jungler feeding your bottom lane double buzz or a support that just can't stop getting hooked. But if you're stuck in a certain elo, it's not just your teammates. If you really want to climb, you need to take responsibility and identify what you're doing wrong and avoid these mistakes so you can go ahead and stop becoming your own anchor. The first and probably the most common mistake that players make is pushing without vision. This problem is especially common with lane bullies like Darius, Jace, and Kate. Bullying the lane usually means trading heavily and shoving in the wave to pressure your opponent, causing them to miss CS. Once you have your opponent push under their tower, it can be super tempting to constantly harass them to keep up the pressure. Going to put a ward down feels like you're just relieving pressure for free, giving them a few seconds to safely clear the wave and potentially take a base. While this may seem like a low elo habit, it's been one that I've seen all the way up the ranks. It's super easy to tunnel on winning the 1v1, but that just leaves you open to being ganked. After that fact, many laners will call this jungle diff, but it's not your jungler's job to just sit there while you push wave after wave into their tower. Instead of inting and then shifting blame, take the time to put some wards down, and don't be lazy about it. All too often, people walk 5 steps forward to put up a ward right outside of their lane. If you have a ton of lane priority, take the time that you have to get the ward a little bit further out. That way you can go ahead and see ganks coming from further away. With that vision down, you can keep up the pressure in the lane risk-free. I personally try to communicate with my team constantly to use their trinkets and buy control wards. I know it can be easy for it to slip your mind, but what really bothers me is when I ask them to use their wards and they still don't do it, and then they die to ganks. It's not that hard. Drop the ego, drop the ward, and drop your standards because I'm single, and let's win as a team. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What do your teammates do that drives you crazy? Of course, feeding teammates is annoying, but that's a bit broad. We want to know what specific habits and mistakes that you guys hate to see. Let us know your answers in the comments down below. Now, let's get back into the video. The second mistake that we'll be talking about is bad back timings. Whether you have a hard-winning matchup, you're on the losing side of the lane, it's a skill-based duel to the death, or both of you and your lane opponent are just here to farm it out, recalling at the right times is a crucial lane skill. The first rule for recalling in lane is not to be too greedy. If your opponent is going back, match it and buy what you can. It doesn't matter if you're just 300 gold from finishing the full item. Reset and buy the components that you can. In the event that you do slip up and let your opponents get a free reset over you, the best thing that you can do is just recall immediately after you clear the wave. It's all too common to see someone refuse to reset because they think about the fact that their opponent is going to deny them a wave by shoving it into their tower, and potentially just taking a plate or two. Just cut your losses, give up the farm, and go spend the rest of your gold so it can be useful on the map. Our next big mistake is overstaying after getting a kill. This is sort of a sub point to our last one, but it's so specific that I felt like it needed its own spot on the list. Whether you solo kill or get a gank, once you bring down the opponent, you should always try to look to spin your gold. But sometimes you make it a little bit too greedy. Maybe you want one more wave of farm, or maybe you just want to do a little bit of damage to the tower. But by staying instead of going back, you have to realize that even if you have an overall gold lead on your opponent, if you don't actually spend the money, you're not going to get any stronger than any laner. In fact, you're weaker than them, since they actually did get to spend their gold when they did. You end up in the same spot as someone that doesn't reset at the same time as their opponent, playing off the back foot and unable to use the lead that you got, to the point where you lose that lead and end up being the one losing the lane. This isn't ARAM, you could go back, use that luxury. And this isn't just a laner issue. Way more often than I should, I see junglers get 3 or 4 kills in the early game, get a nice bounty on their head, and well, the smart thing to do is back up and spend a sap. But oftentimes, green can take over. Maybe they're 200 gold short of a full item, and every camp is up, so they go back for a full clear. The second that they make this choice, they are put in a bad spot. If they see a fight happening nearby, they want to react to it, they don't have the items to make much of a difference. So, either you show up to the fight weaker than the other players involved and risk ending that shutdown, or you ignore the play and leave your teammates for dead. Both options are so much worse than the proper route, where they can just go back and spend their gold so they can actually be useful on the map. Another common mistake is not playing properly for vision. While it generally falls onto the supports to place down wards with their support items, this is still a team-wide issue that everybody contributes to. During the laning phase, all 5 players should be working together to establish some form of vision control. Things like warding the river, invading for a deep ward against the enemy jungler, and buying control wards are just things that no players is exempt from. As the games go on, support item upgrades and the supports are able to handle the majority of the warding, but that doesn't mean that other players don't have responsibilities at this point. You should be swapping out your trinket for either Oracle's Lens or Farsight Alteration. Generally, you only want to have one Farsight trinket when you're ahead, since you get more value out of Oracle's ability to deny vision when you're in control of the map. But when you fall behind, it's a good idea to have 2 players go Farsight, so you can go ahead and scout out your jungle or Baron for free before you face check it. The only person who should have a yellow trinket outside the laning phase is the top laner, since they can place a ward they can TP to later for either just backdooring or giving them a flank engage on the enemy team. Other than trinkets, it's the responsibility of all players to contribute to buying control wards. It's just way too common to see players be at 4 to 5 items but refuse to sell that Doran's item or potions. You get way more value out of control wards than a starter item at the later stages of the game, I assure you. Playing the vision game can be tedious, but it's just one of the many facets of micro that are so important to winning games. In fact, the strategy part of the game is even more important than micro in some cases. Just think about how many games you've seen get thrown because one team face checks in the other jungle. A 10k gold lead doesn't mean much when your entire team is hit in the face with a Malphite Fiddlesticks Wombo combo. So if you want to level up your macro game or any other areas that you may be lacking in, you can go ahead and check out ProGuides.com. Our top tier coaches can teach you everything that you need, from the basics to advanced techniques, and maybe even some of their personal secrets to help you climb to the top of the ladder. So head over and book your session now. Now without further ado, let's get back to the topic at hand. Even if your gameplay is good and you're able to get a massive lead, bad rune pages and poor itemization can really hinder your ability to carry games. While you may not notice them much when you're playing the game, optimizations and builds can really add up to a massive difference. We cover all the broken champions inside of our meta videos, where we give the best items and rune setups for certain champions, and explain why they're good and how to make them work, so feel free to check those out if you want to build the right way on those champions. But like I said, we mostly just cover the very best champions. There are way too many champions, and way too many builds to list them all in our videos, but there are a ton of resources that can help you out. Stat websites are a good starting point if you want some general help, but be careful. You don't want to mindlessly take the same cookie cutter build every game. That goes for our videos as well. This is a good baseline, and make sure you change your build accordingly to the game and the matchups that you're going against. Understanding situational things like swapping between bone plating and second wind depending on whether you're dealing with an all-in situation versus poke heavy lanes, or just knowing when it's best to build glass cannon versus when you go Zhonya's or Mercurial Scimitar can be huge. If you're the sole damage threat on a team of tanks and supports, you probably want as much damage as possible. The next big mistake is not dodging. This one is pretty simple, so there's not a lot to really talk about here. When you get into a champ select and you have a teammate that's on a massive loss streak, they are already arguing, they have autofills, yourself included, or you just don't like the team comps, don't hesitate to dodge. It may feel like the coward's way out, but trust me, I have abused dodging forever. Any player at the top of the ladder will tell you that dodging is key to actually climbing. Even if you get a weight out of Q, doing literally nothing is better than spending the time and losing a game, especially when it's one that you had a bad feeling about before it even started. Another apprehension is that you're just throwing away your LP when you dodge, but the thing is, yes, you're losing LP, but 1, it's less LP lost than would have been if you actually lost the game, and 2, it's LP lost but not MMR. If you value climbing in the long term, MMR means so much more than your LP. I've even dodged promo games that I've had a bad feeling about, because if I'm gonna lose the game anyways, I may as well preserve that MMR. A huge mistake that can throw the entire game is not playing properly around your power spikes. While most people see power spikes as massive item purchases like Infinity Edge or Cassadin hit at level 16, power spikes big and small happen at all stages of the game. While those big spikes that we talked about are definitely the more prominent one, a power spike can also be as simple as going back for a cheap item or two that make the lane so much easier for you. For example, let's look at the top lane scenario. You're Maokai versus Irelia. While you may win brief trades, if you force an all-in against Irelia, it can get a little bit risky. If she's able to stack her passive on minions and lands her E on you, you're probably just dead. In fact, even if you dodged her E with your W, Irelia with a fully stacked passive isn't something I'd bet against. If you wait until you have enough gold to buy Balmies or Bramble's Vest, everything changes entirely. The combination of Thorns damage, Grievous Wounds, damage from Balmies, and overall tankiness may make it an incredibly efficient purchase for any tank versus AD matchup. It turns you into a lane bully without any counterplay. And this isn't exclusive on tanks. If you're Zed, it may be a good idea to go back to get a serrated Dirk before using your ultimate to give you a better chance of netting a kill for your first ult of the game. Or on the more defensive side of things, you may want to go back for a Seeker's Arm Guard or Verdant Barrier to survive against assassins. As the game goes on, you want to have the same mindset. Think about how close you or a teammate is to an item spike and play around it. Maybe you're 300 golds from a Rabadon's, or your ADC needs a couple of camps for Infinity Edge. If your team is that close to such a major spike, and the other team is just going on the second or third dragon, concede the objective, take farm, get vision on the other side of the map, and let your team reach that point where you're more likely to win those fights. Now, with all of that being said, another thing to keep in mind is that both teams have to do this, and sometimes you have to weigh which spikes means more. Say you still don't have that Rabadon's, and your ADC never got the reset for Infinity Edge, but the enemy Cassadin is level 15. It may be best to force a game-deciding Baron fight before letting him reach that massive spike. Possibly the worst mistake to see a team lose from on this entire list is playing around losing lanes. This one is tough because it's a two-sided issue. 1. When a laner loses, it feels like it's up to their jungler to bail them out. 2. When the jungler sees a lane losing, they may feel like they have to force a play in that lane to stop the bleeding. Both of these mindsets are actually horrible. The laner is just being plain entitled, and the jungler, while he has good intentions, is screwing over the rest of his team in the process. Here are all the reasons that this is a bad idea. First, if you gank for an already losing lane and their jungler is nearby, which they should be since it's their winning lane, odds are you're gonna lose that 2v2 or 3v3 pretty bad. When you lose a fight, the enemy laner is now even further ahead, and now you're part of the problem. Not only is that jungler getting ganks and kills and assists, but they can also invade and take camps away. Another way this goes bad is if you lose 1v2 or 2v3. This of course depends on the matchup, but if you've tried ganking a fed Darius or a kill lane like Thresh and Draven, you know that it's pretty easy to end up making a bad situation even worse. The third thing to think about when playing around a losing lane is what's happening on the rest of the map. If you have a winning bot lane and you spend so much time trying to stop the bleeding top lane, what is it costing you? Not only does bot lane have to back off and stop applying pressure, but the enemy team is free to take dragon, counter jungle your bot side, or even force a dive on your bot laners even if you're playing as safe as possible. So instead of trying to fall into the trap of trying to band-aid a gunshot wound, sack your already losing lanes in favor of helping your teammates that will have a chance of carrying the game. Another big mistake is overcommitting for a kill. Whether it's that 1v1 or 2v2 kill in laning phase, a skirmish over scuttle crab, or a crucial late game team fight, overchasing for a single kill can end up setting you way behind or even costing you the entire game. It's super frustrating when you get someone down to the single digits of HP, and it's pretty frequent to see players flash, almost by reflex, to secure that kill. But this type of play almost always does more harm than it does good. We'll start off by looking at the laning phase. More often than not, this is a problem in the bottom lane. The ADC either overestimates their damage or doesn't even realize that heal or exhaust is still up, so they flash in for the kill. Even if they get the kill, they have to die for it, and it's not always a great play to go for because you lose flash. And also because a lot of the times when you're going out aggressive, it usually means that your lane is pushing into the opponent. If you're trading your life away for one-on-one as an ADC, most supports aren't going to be able to hard shove in the wave and get that reset. The result is the enemy bot lane getting a freeze on you, so now you're forced to overextend a farm. But like I mentioned earlier, since you blew your flash on that kill, you're also susceptible to being ganked by the enemy jungler. Any competent jungler will look down there by the time that you get back to the lane, forcing you to either play way back and miss farm and even XP, or risk dying to the gank. Basically, it's never worth throwing away wave management for a single greedy kill. Now, let's talk about the same concepts but at the later stages of the game. If you reach late game teamfights and you're playing as a backline carry, your main focus should always be surviving as long as you can, and do as much damage as possible. So when you get a target low and you either flash after them to kill them, you're accomplishing neither of these. Sure, you may be securing that single kill on the target, but you're now in a spot where the enemy team can easily blow you up, and once you're dead, you're not really worth that much as a carry. Of course, this is a case-by-case basis, so if you flash in and then you get a kill on the only fed person on the enemy team, it might be worth it, but if you're the only fed person on your team, maybe don't do that. To overcome this, recognize that once somebody is so low that they're one spell or one attack from death, they are essentially dead and they are no longer able to participate in the fight, and you should turn your focus elsewhere. Like I mentioned earlier, take this part with a grain of salt. Obviously, there will be cases where it's worth flashing to kill somebody if they're super high priority, and that can affect how the fight goes, or if you're just confident that your team will be able to back you up after the kill. Finishing things up, our last big mistake is forcing when you don't need to and not forcing when you should be. This point is one that takes a good understanding of how to measure the game state. While that can be a very complex and nuanced thing, the TLDR is understanding what your potential win conditions are, if things are going as they need to for the team to reach the win conditions, and what to do to either enforce the things that are going well or just forcibly fix what's going wrong. So, essentially speaking, when things are going well, take it slow, get vision, play to not throw. When things are looking grim, force as hard as you can, or you're most likely going to be able to snowball a way back into the game. And that about wraps up the 10 mistakes that every player makes. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you sub so you never miss out on any of our other content. Remember, let us know what your teammates do that drives you crazy down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of our community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, good luck on the Rift, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.